Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of Experience Kills. I am your host Ben, and joined with me today in his perennial spot, it's Richard.
Hello Ben.
Hello Richard, and while he is one, they are billions. Just thought of that on the spot, what do you think?
It's pretty good, that. It's pretty good.
Thanks, man.
It would have sounded more dramatic if I didn't do a hello that was like Marsha off of Spaced. Do you remember that? Hello.
Well, that's ruined the coolness of this intro. We were here to talk about They Are Billions by Numantian Games, which is a small indie studio out of Spain, and their current console port that's now appeared on Xbox One. But first of all, Richard, I want to ask you, what's your history with RTS games? Do you have much of a back catalogue that you've played over the years?
Not really. Well, I suppose I have, but I've never really been, passionate about RTS games. I've played Command and Conquer, a few of those in that series. Halo Wars, I guess.
Sure.
I've dabbled a bit.
Dabbled? Because there was always one bit of an RTS game that I enjoyed the most. And if I said to you turtling, would you know what I was talking about?
Is that like when you just build up a stupid big army and unleash?
So it's sort of like in Age of Empires or Command and Conquer, when you secure your base and you just, like you said, build loads of units inside, but you're mostly like building up an incredible defense and then going forth with what you've got, or just letting the enemy come to you and just destroying them upon your battlements, that kind of thing. Always fun to do, and that's basically seemingly what has inspired Numantian Games to make They Are Billions, which is this RTS set in a sort of post-apocalyptic world in which zombies have basically taken over the planet, and you are the last bastion of humanity, building a base to try and survive for a set amount of days, depending on the difficulty setting you put it on, until you are rescued. So you're basically just turtling. All you're doing is trying to fortify and secure, the amount of space you need to build this colony up. But you're not being aggressive. You're being overtly defensive. So walls and researching technology and units to hold your ground.
That sounds cool. That's like the best bit of RTS, isn't it?
Absolutely, 100%. And it on top of that, we've got this vague sort of steampunk vibe to it. So it's kind of the technology in the era of like a spun-off from Victorian era thing. So you've got like steam-powered mech units and Tesla towers, and sort of this interesting mismatch of like fantasy units, but also combined with sort of tech, but in a kind of classical steampunky way, which is pretty unique and interesting when put against zombies, because it's not really a kind of setting you've experienced with zombies before. I certainly haven't ever seen a steampunk versus zombies combination in any kind of media in the past. So it sets itself apart with that as well, which is pretty fun.
Oh, it looks pretty cool. My initial impression, because it looks kind of like old 16-bit Amiga games stylistically, and I thought it had a bit of a Bitmap Brothers vibe. It's obviously better looking than an Amiga game, but that kind of pixelated pastel colour sort of.
I think it's I see what you're saying. It's less pixelated and more low poly, I guess would be how I describe it. More like an Age of Empires game or a Command and Conquer game. It has that fixed isometric viewpoint, which those old school RTSs were all about. You have a pretty good flexibility with zooming in and stuff, but you can't rotate the camera, for example, and you can't get right down to a single model, which you can in a lot of more modern RTS games. This definitely has a classic vibe to it, which is definitely intentional, and also makes sense for a small independent studio because it's obviously a lot less resource intensive to develop that kind of visual aesthetic.
It's probably also necessary that it cuts back on some of that stuff because of the sheer magnitude of the crowds when the zombies do attack, because that looks mental.
So one of the big gameplay sort of mechanics is, as you know, again, this is variable on the difficulty settings. There's a few different things you can do to modify how tough the game is, from the different maps you can have, which are randomly generated but within a certain theme, to the sort of amount of days you have to protect your base for, and then also sort of the enemy density, the amount of zombies on the map. You can modify all of that, but what is sort of the same though is that over a sort of certain period of time, a zombie horde will attack. Now, you usually get a few zombies on the map, just stragglers that will attack you periodically, but then when this horde comes, you get like a big alert and a warning. It's coming from a certain direction. You have to prepare your army and your fortifications in that direction to try and deal with this overwhelming force of zombies, and that can be very, very, very scary. And then when you get towards the end game, and there's just so many of them coming at you from every direction, and you're just trying desperately to hold out as you watch the days tick by. It's a very intense actual experience, and the main form of gameplay is this survival mode. And I am aware that on PC they've now brought in a campaign mode, but when this console port was produced by Blitworks, who have done loads of console port works over the years, bringing stuff to the new generation of consoles. I'm guessing they did it from an earlier build, which was before the campaign. I'm hoping they're going to bring the campaign in, because right now all it is the survival mode, and that is the core of the experience. That is the main point of the game, but it's a bit disappointing that it isn't there.
Well, particularly since consoles are more of a natural home for campaign sort of experiences, aren't they?
Absolutely, yeah. So let's talk about, you used an interesting word there, natural home for experiences. A console is not the natural home for an RTS, purely because trying to play a lot of RTSs on a controller is very, very challenging. And over the years, I've played many of them. I actually find it quite fascinating to see how the designers get around that problem with control, and, you know, radial menus and different ways of selecting enemies, and just, you know, the Halo War style all units comes to mind. However, They Are Billions doesn't really do any of that. It does the perhaps most awkward, poorest form of sort of port to console when it comes to control you could possibly imagine, which is a one-to-one mapping of the mouse cursor to the thumbstick, which makes selecting units, the grab box, or selecting sort of menu options for builds and stuff like that, very, very difficult. There are a couple of shortcuts from different button presses that you can get you to the menus and stuff like that, but even that's incredibly clumsy. I found just navigating difficult. I especially found giving commands to my units difficult to do on the screen, and it's a real shame if the controller is your only option. However, this game fully supports mouse and keyboard, which I have tested out. And when using the mouse and keyboard, this game plays exactly like it would on PC. With exactly the same control scheme. I looked it up, basically, it's identical. And that's clearly how this game is meant to be played. Now, it's an interesting choice, because I think they've acknowledged that this sort of genre, these guys at They Are Billions and Nemantian and Blitworks have gone, right, this is an RTS, it should be played with keyboard and mouse. Why put the time into developing a control scheme for a controller, which will never be as good as keyboard and mouse, when you can just say to someone, play it with keyboard and mouse? I'm not sure how I feel about that. It definitely goes against the nature of console gaming to me a little bit, that seems to be focused so heavily on that.
I mean, they've brought it to a medium that focuses on controllers, you know?
Yeah.
People play it with controllers. Fine, you can put a mouse and keyboard in, but then if you wanted to play games like that, you wouldn't be playing on an Xbox in the first place, would you? So, I'm not sure about that.
No, but I am happy to say I didn't have to do any faffing around. I literally just took, I have a USB, wireless USB keyboard and mouse, you know, bog standard, nothing special. Took the little adapter for that, plugged it into my Xbox, and it worked, you know, without any effing around. You know, I just had to drop the mouse sensitivity a little bit for my own comfort, but that was it, and everything worked perfectly in that regard. The only thing, it seems weird to me, this port, because this game was in early access for a really long time, and it's only just gone to full release on PC. So the fact that we don't have campaign in here, the fact that we don't have a proper controller-based scheme, you know, that isn't really properly ported to console, And we don't really even have any tutorials in this game. I had to spend quite a lot of time just looking through. There's like a help menu that you access from the game just to find out how to do anything, because you are told literally nothing about how this game controls using the controller when you first play the game. If you are going in with a keyboard and mouse, it will be a lot more intuitive, especially if you've got experience with RTSs. However, if you're trying to play this with controller, you're going to need to spend some time reading that menu, because you'll have no idea about any of the button presses or any of the shortcuts or how anything works. And I thought it was weird that there wasn't any kind of tutorialization in here at all. And that does speak to me about how I've played quite a few early access RTS type games, and the last thing they add is a tutorial, and they just let you figure it out usually. And that's fine when a game's in early access or on Xbox Game Preview, but this is a full release, so I was a bit disappointed to see that these sort of features weren't properly supported here.
That is a shame.
Because it is, like you said, really cool. It's a really cool setting. It runs really well, even when there's lots of units on the screen and everything. It looks great. It's a fun RTS. It works, at its core, it's really good. It's just that they've not really put a lot of thought into this port onto console, is what it seems. And that's unfortunate. And like I said, Blitworks have done loads of great ports. You often see their logo come up in front of various games. Do you remember Rogue Galaxy, which is a really, really good game? That was one of their ports, really well ported onto console. But this, I don't know if we can blame them. I don't know if the build they were given to port was just particularly early. It feels like they've ported an early access version of the game. Now, I'll admit, I've not done a huge amount of reading of the Numantian Games blog or anything to look into what their plans for support are for the game, but I would really hope that they're intending to bring it up to date with where the PC is, because right now it's just not there.
Well, you'd expect that they'll continue to support it, but with it being a fairly minor release, and this is coming a couple of years after the game came out on PC.
Yeah.
You wonder about the pace of progress on any updates, don't you?
Yeah, it's always difficult when you're developing for a non-primary platform. Clearly, these guys are focused on their PC stuff. So the question of how well the console will be supported is very, very difficult to say if they're really going to put the effort in. But I hope they do, because at its core, it's a flipping cool idea. I really enjoy playing it with keyboard and mouse, though it's just not how my living room is set up. It's not how I play games on console. I had to put time and effort into actually making it a suitable space for me to do it with keyboard and mouse. So I would love to see improvements on those controller options for actually navigating my way around the game. It just doesn't feel like any time was really put into making it work specifically for controller. Yeah, so it's just a bit disappointing in that regard, because I really love the idea of this game. But it's hard for me to say to people, go and get this on console, go and get this on Xbox. If you can play it on PC, you should probably play it on your PC.
Yeah.
So, unless you have any further questions or queries about They Are Billions, Richard, we will wrap this puppy up in a zombie-shaped mould.
Let's wrap it up.
So that was another exciting episode of Experience Kills. Thank you very much to Numantian Games and They Are Billions. Like I said, a good RTS, maybe not a home on an Xbox. We'll be back very, very soon with more exciting, brilliant, awesome videos. So please like and subscribe. We really appreciate that. And if you don't have time to watch the video, all of the videos are available in audio format as well. So you can check that out on Spotify, iTunes, or a dedicated RSS feed, which we provide all the links to these in the YouTube descriptions. So yeah, you can find us at Experience Kills on Twitter. You can find me at DIYE. And you can find Richard at...
I'm at Colonel Red on Twitter.
So until next time, I think we will say bye-bye.
Bye.